be wise, my friend.
Tell me, friend, when did Saruman the Wise abandon reason for madness?
When did Saruman turn against the West? And today we're also going to be taking a deep dive into the rivalry between Gandalf the Grey and Saruman the White. Or rather, was there a rivalry? Or was it very one-sided? Did Gandalf care? And we're also going to be talking about the light elements, because there are some comical moments in said rivalry. Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. This is Gone with Gandalf, and every single Friday I make these videos and you guys know what to do, I suppose. Thank you very much to you at the back, the weather-beaten adventurers, the older subscribers, and hello to all the newer subscribers as well. Thank you very much for your support, but let's get right on in to the video. And once again I have broken out the Unfinished Tales of Numenor and Middle-earth. This copy actually was brought by my uncle. Muista lukea myös koulukirjoja, and he watched last week's video, so there's your shout out. But from this I've gathered a lot of information, and we'll start off with the basics. Of course, the Istari, the wizards, they were sent to Middle-earth in the 1000th year of the Third Age to help the Free Peoples combat the threat of Sauron. Basically, the Valar didn't want to go themselves, so... And Saruman, of course, was one of these wizards, and, you know, he thought, as someone that really liked to learn new things, a lover of lore and things like that, you know, to beat the enemy, you first have to know every intricacy of said enemy. So he kind of read up on Sauron, and particularly the Rings of Power, and to note that both Sauron and Saruman were both Maya of Aule, so there's a similarity there, but... as Elrond did say at the Council of Elrond, it is perilous to study too deeply in the arts of the enemy for good or ill. And, well, Saruman took the whole thing about, you know, to beat evil, you must become evil. Well, he took that literally, but not immediately. But he read up so much on the Rings of Power that he eventually would want one. The one. Let's talk about the rivalry then, because as I said at the beginning, it was quite one-sided. I mean, Gandalf didn't really care all that much, but Saruman, he disliked Gandalf. He feared him. Perhaps it's because he knew that he was destined to be greater than he. So this brought up quite the intense rivalry, if a little bit one-sided. Well, mainly he was just jealous that Gandalf was well liked by the Free Peoples of Middle-earth, and much more liked than he ever was. Perhaps this was because he desired neither power nor reverence, which obviously Saruman was quite into. So what would happen? Of course, his paranoia would grow. It's a steady process, but in the end he was troubled more by his silences than by his words. And isn't that a very curious statement there from the Unfinished Tales? We'll get on to that a bit later on. So Saruman, he didn't really understand why Gandalf was given the Ring of Fire, Narya, by Círdan upon his arrival into Middle-earth. And he didn't understand why Galadriel would want Gandalf to have been the head of the White Council. And he didn't understand why Gandalf ever would hang out in the Shire, because of course Gandalf really loved the Shire, and Saruman didn't. But as a guy that really wants to learn everything there is to learn, he went there himself in disguise as a robed man, and well, he learnt all that he could whilst he was there, and at the end of it, he thought, well, there's not really anything special about it. Why would Gandalf spend so much time here? So he never came back himself until the end of his life, but he continued to send his spies there and persons of interest to gather more information on what is happening in the Shire, because he thought everyone powerful must have some kind of scheme to elevate and enhance their own power. Does everyone need to have their own plot? That's kind of interesting and quite sinister. Saruman became a lodger in Isengard in the Tower of Orthanc from the year 2759 of the Third Age. He was given the keys by the steward Beren of Gondor, because of course Gondor still owned Isengard, even if they'd already ceded the province of Calenarthon to the Rohirrim. But then it isn't until the year 2951 where the thoughts of Saruman are laid bare, perhaps, that this is when he really wants the One Ring for himself. So it's not a quick revelation for him. It has taken him almost 2,000 years upon Middle-earth, where he has then kind of almost been seduced by the yearning for the One Ring. In the year 2850, that is when Gandalf had just been to Dol Guldur. By the way, that is when he gets the key to Erebor and the map from Thrain whilst he's there. And this is when he discovers Sauron was actually in Dol Guldur. In the following year, you have the meeting of the White Council, and this is when Gandalf says, we need to go in and clear out Dol Guldur, and Saruman said, no. And in the Tale of the Years, which is in the appendices of The Return of the King in The Lord of the Rings, you can see that this is when Saruman starts to search the Gladden Fields. The Gladden Fields, of course, is where Isildur fell, so that would be a logical starting point to try and search out where the One Ring could be. Was this the beginning of his fall? Well, I don't think so. Still, at this point, he's certainly still trying to stop Sauron from becoming a thing. It's kind of dubious whether or not he's actually trying to serve the Free Peoples or he's trying to serve himself. So it's not quite crossing the line just yet. But it is this council meeting in 2851 where you get more of this rivalry between Gandalf and Saruman. And it is quite hilarious, to be honest, when I found out about this. Saruman, as I already said, he'd been to the Shire, he'd done some digging, finding out what Gandalf found so interesting. Now, he'd always thought that pipeweed, which Gandalf often smoked, was ridiculous. But actually, having had been to the Shire, he then starts to give it a go himself and finds out that he quite likes it, but he wants to keep it a secret because he doesn't want it to be out there that he himself is copying Gandalf or like lowering himself to smoking pipeweed. All the hobbits kind of see the dodgy dude wandering around the forests and they thought it was Gandalf, but people hear of this, they tell Gandalf. Gandalf already knows that Saruman has been around the Shire. And so Gandalf knows, but Saruman doesn't know that Gandalf knows about the pipeweed issue that he is having himself, which I think is just fantastic. But at this meeting, Gandalf is smoking profusely right in the face of Saruman, and Saruman gets quite annoyed because he's like, why are you doing this? Like, we're trying to have a serious meeting here. And he says, Gandalf, you might find that smoke blown out cleared your mind of shadows within. Perhaps this is said with a degree of sarcasm, and perhaps now Saruman is just realising that Gandalf knows more than I thought he would know. I thought I was keeping this a secret, and he already knows this is a disaster. And, I mean, Gandalf goes on then to say that, it's good and it gives you patience to not be stirred into anger from listening to error. Obviously aimed directly at Saruman for kind of putting down the idea of going to attack Dol Guldur. But Saruman, we already know that he is rather insecure, and a trait of very insecure people is that they try and put other people down to bring themselves up. So him kind of deriding Gandalf for his use of the pipeweed, then kind of he comes back and says, well, you use it too, basically, and it's not really a secret. But just when you didn't think that the Unfinished Tales could have any more nuggets of gold, well, immediately after that line, you get some more. Gandalf did not laugh again, and he did not answer. But looking keenly at Saruman, he drew on his pipe and sent out a great ring of smoke, with many smaller rings that followed it. Do you remember when I said that Saruman was troubled more by his silences than by his words? Isn't that quite eerie? You can almost imagine Gandalf there with his pipe smoking, looking directly at Saruman and kind of bringing up this vision of the Rings of Power. How much does Gandalf know of Saruman's mind? Does Saruman suspect that Gandalf already knows that his allegiance may be swayed to the dark side? Does Gandalf already know that Saruman plans to get the One Ring for his own possession? What does Saruman think Gandalf is going to do with this knowledge? The context for this quotation is that Saruman is deriding Gandalf once more for his association with peasant folk of the Shire. And this is followed by, then he put up his hand, as if to grasp them, and they vanished. With that he got up and left Saruman without another word. Saruman may have very well have been confused by this. What is going on here? Is there some kind of link between the hobbits and the Rings of Power that he doesn't know about? Of course there would be, but not in 2851. But looking back on it, does Saruman think that Gandalf already knew what was going to happen? Did he think that Gandalf knew that one of the hobbits was going to come into possession with not only one of the Rings of Power, but the one ring to rule them all? And for this reason, he'd been kind of having this monopoly of the Shire. How humiliating it would be that Gandalf is openly taunting him, the leader of the White Council, this openly, about said Rings of Power, and without even saying, barely a word. Gandalf at this point did, of course, not suspect any treachery on Saruman's behalf in 2851, but just think about, for a moment, how this conversation would go down from Saruman's perspective. Moving on to more dates then, in the year 2939, the servants of Saruman learn that the servants of Sauron are also searching for the One Ring in the Gladden Fields area, which tells him that Sauron knows of the fate of Isildur and where he died. 2 years later, in 2941, this is when he kind of comes to his senses and says, let's go and clear out Dol Guldur. This is when the Battle of the Five Armies takes place, or rather in the events of The Hobbit, and this is when Sauron is driven out of Dol Guldur once more. Is this the point where he has strayed to the dark side, if you like? Has he turned against the West just yet? I don't think so. I think at this point, he's certainly working for himself now. He's trying to get the One Ring for himself. He's working in secret. He's not telling any of the other members of the White Council of just what he's doing. He is clearly just out for his own gain. 2953. Final meeting of the White Council, after which he retreats to Isengard and fortifies it. This is when he makes it his own. So up until this point, he's kind of been that lodger under Gondor, but now he's taken direct ownership. What are Gondor going to do? They're quite far away and quite weak. But still, I don't think he has been wholly corrupted, and he is still working for himself, but he is not working for the forces of evil just yet. Not until the year 3000, there or thereabouts. It's kind of unknown. It's a circa date. But Saruman uses the Orthanc Stone, one of the Palantiri, and he has a direct conversation, a FaceTime call with Sauron, who of course has the Ithil Stone in Barad-dûr. So at this point, he 100% does turn traitor. Very unfortunate. So from this point onwards to the War of the Ring, his worst case scenario in his mind is that he would still be on the winning side, and Sauron would of course get the One Ring. That's his worst case scenario. He would much rather have the One Ring for himself. But then to the rivalry, just imagine how much his pride would have been wounded when he learns that Gollum's ring, as it was known, was in the Shire. And Gandalf, being a great advocate of the Shire and friend to the hobbits, how long would he have known of the location of the One Ring? This would have hurt Saruman deeply, because like the Rings of Power, no one knows more about them than he, save Sauron himself. This was deemed his a special province, I think is what it is known as. And to top it off, Gandalf could have known about this for an extremely long time, like 150 years plus. Imagine if he's like thinking through his mind, like, oh, did he know back in 2851 when we were having that chat and he was just smoking and puffing smoke into my face? How rude of him. And he would have been enraged when Gandalf, you know, correctly mistrusted him and didn't tell him about the One Ring. And it's also quite funny that Saruman had worked so long in secret trying to find the One Ring to then be like annoyed when someone else is kind of working for the good side, for the West, and, you know, kind of not telling him. But then, at what point did Gandalf finally know when Saruman had betrayed them? Well, that actually didn't hit him until July the 10th of 3018 when he was imprisoned in Orthanc, and a couple of months later, 18th of September, that is when he escaped. Well, there you go. I didn't think this video was going to be all that long, but in the end I started writing, and then it was like, pow, there's so much that I can talk about here, and I was like, how am I going to condense this? But I hope that you've all enjoyed this. Leave me some kind of feedback. Go on, do it. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. Join me next week for another lore video for Time Game with Gandalf. Good day. Oh my god, my hair is so annoying.